Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com and one of our fantastic True Health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 160. My guest today is a medical doctor who's dedicated her life to helping patients no longer need heavy medications in order to live day to day. Her focus is on helping alleviate things like anxiety, pain, and depression using a natural substance. Dr. Munkacy has survived breast cancer, and during her year-long ordeal of multiple surgeries, radiation, chemotherapy, she knew there had to be a more effective way to alleviate the pain and suffering that her and the other cancer patients had to endure. Considering how many people nowadays are being diagnosed and treated with cancer, there are so many people in pain, and there's an alternative way that is safe, effective, and healthy. And that's exactly what Dr. Karen Munkacy has dedicated her life to helping those patients with, and also helping spread this information and educate us on this type of natural medicine. Dr. Karen, I'm so excited to have you here today. I'd love for you to start by sharing your story, because I am so inspired by the work you are doing, and I know that you have a lot to share with us today.
Thank you so much. So my name is Dr. Karen Munkacy. I'm a board certified in anesthesiology and fellowship trained in pain management. I was a professor of anesthesiology and pain management at UCLA and then at USC. In my 40s, I was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. My son was 2 years old. And so I was given very aggressive cancer treatment. I had 28 radiation treatments. I had a double mastectomy, and I have 4 months of very aggressive chemotherapy. I'm an expert on treating nausea, but there was no medication or combinations of medications that worked effectively against the nausea that I was experiencing. It was like 1,000 times worse than any flu I'd ever had. So I had friends telling me that medical marijuana would be very helpful. I had to move in with my in-laws because I couldn't even take care of myself, and there was no way that I was going to break the law and use medical marijuana, particularly in their house. So I never used it during my treatment. I was cured of cancer, and after I was cured, I started reading journal articles on medical marijuana. In my training, medical school, internship, residency, and fellowship, there was never any information about the medical benefits of medical marijuana. So I didn't know anything about it, only what my friends were telling me that it would be helpful. But after I started reading scientific articles, it became apparent that there was a lot of information in the literature about its medical benefits. And I was really haunted by the suffering that I experienced, and no one should have to choose between breaking the law or suffering horribly. So I worked to get medical marijuana on the ballot in Massachusetts, and it was on the ballot in November 2012. I worked very hard to help get it passed. I spoke in front of any community group that would have me speak in front of them. I talked to legislators. I talked to district attorneys, sheriffs, anyone that I could get in front of to explain that this did indeed have very significant medical benefits. It did pass with 63% of the vote.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we were very happy. And somewhere in that process, I decided that I would like to lead one of these organizations. I had all of this medical knowledge, and I felt that this could be used to create an organization that would create the best medicines and do this really, really well. And also, I was very interested in educating patients, because patients, if you're buying this illegally, the person you're buying it from is not typically giving you a lot of education on how to use it, what to use. And so we created this organization. We now have 60 employees. And everything that we make, our goal is always to make things to the absolute highest standards. So first, we built out a facility to cultivate medical marijuana, and then to process and to make all the different products that we've made. And the question was always, how can we do this in the best possible manners for everything that we did? It's more expensive to do it that way, but for instance, there's several different ways of doing extractions. Some of them leave carcinogens in the products, but that was not acceptable to us. And so we ended up spending over $600,000 on our lab equipment, but it's all state of the art. And the products that we've made are the absolute best that you can make from using medical marijuana. So we have our own lab testing equipment, which also helps with our dosing. So the first question was, how can we make these products the absolute highest quality possible? And then the second question was, how can we do accurate dosing? Because, consistently excellent quality and accurate dosing is something that's been a problem, frankly, in this industry, but it doesn't have to be. And so,
when you say dosing, not people who don't know about medical marijuana, and I didn't know anything really about it until I started doing this podcast, because I've interviewed a few people on it, and there's so many more constituents in it than THC. People just think THC, but that's just one of thousands of chemicals, of natural chemicals, of phytonutrients, or whatever you would call them, of constituents that help the body. And what I was fascinated to find out is that our body actually has cannabinoid receptors in our cells. And so it's fascinating how, when you really get into it, we're going to get into it in this interview, but I have to say that it is a completely fascinating herb. If we can just step away from, because I know we have such a wonderful listenership. We have a lot of really open-minded listeners. I know that we do have a section of listeners that are conservative Christians, that might be in states where this is illegal, that may have been raised with the bias that, marijuana is illegal. I remember being in school in grade 7, during drug education, being told that pot was as bad as heroin, and I ran home crying because I knew my mom smoked pot. She was one of those she worked her butt off. She owned her own company. She had employees, and then she'd come home and she needed to rest, and she'd lock her door, and I'd smell something weird coming out of her room, and I knew what she was doing. And so I was so scared, in grade 7, thinking that my mom was a heroin addict because she was doing pot, because that's the amount of education, the type of education we were raised with. A lot of people have that bias. So we have to put that aside and just observe that marijuana is an herb, and you using it responsibly as a medicine is different from using it like a street drug. Right. And so when you're dealing with a child that is suffering, when you're dealing with an epileptic, when you're dealing with a cancer patient, if you've been at the bedside of a cancer patient and you just cry, your soul weeps for them. All you want to do is help ease their pain. And if there's an herb that is all natural that could ease their pain, then you want to give it to them. And that is completely different from going to your drug dealer and saying, hey, can I get some of that meth? And oh yeah, give me some of that pot. It's completely two totally different worlds. Marijuana can be used as an herbal medicine, and that's what we're discussing today. But when you say accurate dosing, there's THC, then there's THCA, right, which is the part that is not psychotropic. There's the cannabinoids. There's all different kinds of things in that can be in each strain that have different benefits, right? So you've got a lot. It's, you know, from an herbology standpoint, it's actually a really fun medicine because you can see, well, if we have more of these cannabinoids, it's going to help with nausea. And if we have more of these cannabinoids, it's going to help with, you know, this particular maybe sleep or maybe anxiety or depression. And it's from a, you know, if we were talking about peppermint. And there's different kinds of peppermint out there. And this kind of peppermint helps you with nausea, and this kind of peppermint helps you with anxiety. There wouldn't be any sort of negative bias or you know, this preconceived belief system about it, right?
Exactly.
But this is really exciting. So you have the state-of-the-art lab. Your goal is to make products for patients so that you can help them ease their suffering. I'd rather see someone on a natural plant-based medicine for pain or for nausea than a pharmaceutical medicine that will cause more damage. In Canada, when someone's in hospice, they'll pump them full of morphine. And it's ultimately, if you talk to enough healthcare professionals in Canada, you're going to get the real scoop. And it's that they actually pump them full of morphine to help kill them, to help the end of life, you know,
Right.
help the transition go smoother. And that's really sad. You know, I would not, if I was at the end of my life, I would not want someone giving
It
me.
really is. Yeah, it's the best medicine for hospice care because when you give people high doses of morphine, yes, you do alleviate their suffering, but they're not really there anymore. They're so sleepy, and sometimes it's to the point of being unconscious, and actually can, you know, significantly decrease their lifespan because, you know, it's easy. It's pretty easy to give so much that they just stop breathing and then they're gone.
That's what happened to my mom. We brought her into the hospital, you know, and she could walk, and they got her on the morphine, and she very quickly slipped into a coma, and her life was over. And it was, she didn't, you know, if she had not been on morphine, she may have been able to speak to us and be communicative, and, you know, have maybe the last few weeks of her life be more surrounded by her family. I mean, we can only debate that, but I know for me, I would rather be on an all natural pain reliever or nausea reliever than be given a drug that knocks me out so I can't communicate with my family or tell the nurses or the doctors my needs. So there's one benefit to what you do. This is really exciting. So here you've got these desires in mind to make a medicine out of this that is so accurately measured that you'll know all the different cannabinoids and the amount of a percentage that's in each strain as you test them, right?
So we can do accurate dosing, and it actually works better than anything for hospice care because patients can take this medicine and still be alert, and it works for their pain. It works for nausea. It's the only anti-nausea medication that also stimulates appetite. It works for their anxiety, depression, inability to sleep. So it's one medicine that's very safe, that doesn't have any significant side effects typically, and it helps with all of the suffering that people experience when they're dying. It's really the perfect medication for people who are in hospice care. Unfortunately, you know, in some places they ban it and they don't allow it, and that should not be, because here you have this safe medication that's so very helpful, and in some facilities, I actually know a woman recently, we gave her medical marijuana, and it was really easing her pain and her anxiety, her depression. She was able to sleep at night. She was eating. Her nausea was decreased. They found out that she was using it, and they asked her to leave. And it's just tragic. Absolutely tragic. And she went home, and it's a real burden to care for someone on hospice care because it is 24 hours, and you really do need trained medical personnel helping out a lot. But the family had to take over the care because she had to leave the facility that she was at. This should not happen.
That is so sad. So I know I have a friend who went and cared for her dying sister in hospice, and they snuck her edibles to ease. I mean, and you know, it's at the end of your life when you're dying of a disease that's ravaging your body. Come on. I mean, really? come on, just give the person what's going to help them. If it's natural, like, it's so
Right.
sad that we've got this red tape. But just, on a completely different topic, looking at hemp, for example, which is not marijuana. Hemp is that you can't smoke hemp and get high, and yet it's been illegal. But with hemp, we can make paper. We can cut down way less trees. We can make
It's
clothing
an
and ropes and
infinitely renewable source.
yes, and it's
Right.
illegal because, and people think hemp is bad because, of the propaganda, but hemp was made illegal. It was legal. We were actually using it to make clothing and rope for the ships, and it was legal. And then it was made illegal when the machine came out that could make hemp pulp into paper. And one very rich man who owned forests and owned a very large newspaper in New York City lobbied to have it be illegal so that his interests weren't compromised, because it's way more cost effective to grow hemp and turn it into paper than to own a forest and cut down trees and turn that into paper.
Right. And so now we have some states that have legalized it, and farmers are growing it. This is a whole new industry that we can have in place pretty easily if we legalize the growing of hemp. And a lot of people will have jobs, growing this. So that's something else that I'd really like to see happen, because there's absolutely no reason for hemp to not be a legal crop.
Right, and it's also a great food source. There's so many positive things about hemp, and it'll also help with the stigma if we can make hemp legal and start to, have this. I know I'm in Washington where marijuana is legal, like alcohol is legal, and I know there's lots of states where it's legal as a medicine that you have to get a doctor to agree to prescribe it to you. So state by state, it's starting to come around. So now
29 states currently.
Fantastic.
And every week it seems like a new state has come on board. And if you include the states that are only allow CBD, it's well over 40 states have legalized medical marijuana in different forms. It's really amazing. It's the vast majority of states, and it's even some very conservative states that have legalized it, because what's happening is people will go to their state representatives or their senators and tell their stories. This is working for me. I shouldn't have to break the law to have access to this medication. So there's a study that was recently published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it was in the last issue actually. And this study documented that CBD, which is one of the compounds in medical marijuana, treats intractable pediatric epilepsy, which is a horrible problem. And children and it doesn't make this compound doesn't make you high, but it's a compound from marijuana, and in children where nothing else has worked, this actually works and controls their seizures. And this is demonstrated, and this is just published in the most prestigious medical journal probably in the world. So we know now that it has medical benefits. I was recently at a all-day conference at Harvard, and it was all about the medical benefits of medical marijuana. Fascinating 2-day conference. Used to be a 1-day conference, but there's just so much new information coming out that it was now extended to 2 days. And they actually talked about this study and how CBD definitely helps with pediatric intractable epilepsy. But then 2 lectures after that, they showed that whole plant CBD works better than just the extracted CBD alone. So as you were talking about, Ashley, there are benefits of the whole plant that you don't get when you just take one of the active molecules out of it. It's called the entourage effect, and it's well documented in the scientific literature. There's flavonoids in the plant. Mm-hmm. There's terpenes in the plant. There's multiple cannabinoids in the plant. And at Harvard, at this conference, they presented evidence that the whole plant works better than when you just take out one molecule and use that to treat.
Absolutely. I've heard that before when it comes to like broccoli. Yes, you can extract a constituent out of broccoli and get that in concentrate, and that's great for certain hormones, for example. But when we do that, we're missing out on, and it's good to eat a whole plant as much as possible,
Exactly.
because we're missing out. There's like 1,000 phytonutrients and all these enzymes in broccoli that when we eat it raw, for example, actually raw, you get the most amount of these enzymes and phytonutrients, huge cancer fighting properties, huge immune boosting properties, just from eating your daily amount of broccoli. And so it's, yes, it's always fun to bring science in and extract a constituent and get it in concentrate, but then we miss out on everything else that
Right.
it's
Right.
it's
So
like you wouldn't just eat flour, you gotta bake the whole cake.
exactly. So I've prescribed a medication called Marinol, and Marinol is an extracted product from marijuana. It's THC, and it's only THC. Now, THC is the compound that makes you high, but it also has some medicinal benefits, right? I had patients that I would convince them to take it because it does have benefits, treats their nausea, helps treat their pain. But they would say to me, I don't want to use this. And it's because when you only take one molecule out of this whole plant, you lose the benefits of the other substances in it. And so a lot of them would have very high levels of anxiety and they'd feel awful. It's because there's no CBD in the Marinol and all these other compounds that will work against the anxiety and paranoia and that people can feel from only taking the one molecule, the delta 9 THC. Whole plant works better and treats more effectively the symptoms that people are having, and you're less likely to have side effects too when you use the whole plant versus just using this extracted form that only takes the one particular molecule and puts it in a capsule.
So I mean, I get the cancer patients, I get the end of life, right? Who are your ideal customers? So who else should be seeking your products?
Great question. So here's our ideal patient. Our ideal patient is anyone that we can help, which is most people that come in the door, right? So people have studied, well, why do people go to medical marijuana dispensaries? You've got all these pharmaceuticals that treat all these different conditions. So why are they abandoning that and showing up at our dispensary? It's because the pharmaceuticals have failed them and they're not getting the positive effects from the pharmaceuticals, and they're getting a lot of side effects typically. So here's what happens when you go to your physician. And I'm a physician, right? So you go in, typically you're not going to be there for more than 15 minutes. They're at most, doctors are allowed to see people in 15 minutes, right? And then the next patient is booked and they're going to fall terribly behind in their schedule. So it's hard to get your whole story out. This is what's happened to me. These are the medications I've worked. This is how they have worked, haven't worked. This is my. So, you'll get a prescription, but the doctor may have not had enough time to get the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And typically, you won't get another appointment for 2 to 4 weeks to come back and see the physician. So if it's not the right medication, or if you're having bad side effects, you've got 2 to 4 weeks of suffering before you're going to be seen again, and that your problems can be addressed. So here's what happens when you come to see us. And all of our staff are very, very well trained in all of the medicinal effects of marijuana. And they're going to give you as much time as needed. And if that means that it's an hour and a half, we're happy to talk to you for an hour and a half. If you know exactly what you want, you've been there before, you just want to go in there and purchase it and be out on your way, that's fine too. So just having someone who will listen to you and really get a full understanding of who you are and what your problems are, unfortunately, that doesn't happen in medicine as often as patients and physicians would like, right? Because there's just, the clock is ticking. We don't have that. So people come to us and we ask them, how can we help you? And then we give them, one of the reasons I decided to go into this and create one of these companies is because I want to fully educate people. There's so many different ways of medicating with medical marijuana. There's so many different products, and you want to get the patient the right product, right? So for instance, if you are nauseated and vomiting from chemotherapy, you'd want something that you can inhale and not swallow, because if you are using an edible when you're really, really nauseated, there's a chance that you'll vomit it up, right? So typically what we'd say is we would want them to use an inhaled medication, and we believe we have the best vape pens on the market. We have a PhD chemist and a Master's of Science in Plant Extraction Technology, and another man who's had 10 years of experience in extractions, and then we have all this equipment. And we have we think, the best vape pen on the market. So when you inhale using our vape pen, you'll have immediate relief, right? So immediately your suffering is gone, and you can titrate to effect. How many medications do you get from your doctor where you can just keep taking it until it works, right? Typically it's take 1 or 2 of these every 4 hours. Well, that might not be what you need, but with a vape pen you can just keep inhaling. We teach patients, you inhale, wait 2 minutes, see how the effects are, because you'll know within 2 minutes whether it works or not. How many medications do you get from your doctor where that you know within 2 minutes whether it's working or not? So you'll titrate that to you have the effect that you need. The problem with vape pens, though, is the effects only last for 3 to 4 hours. So if you want to sleep through the night, you'd want something that lasts longer. So a lot of people who don't understand medical marijuana will say, why edibles? Well, what is that about? You don't go to your CVS or Walgreens and get an edible. Well, the reason for edibles is because they last longer. So we would typically teach patients to use an inhaled form, say a vape pen. Once they have the relief they need, then they don't have nausea, right? They can ingest an edible. That will last 7 or 8 hours, and they can get a good night's sleep. We have patients that haven't had a good night's sleep for years, and they come to us and we teach them how to use the medication so that for the first time, perhaps in as long as they can remember, they're now getting a good night's sleep. So that alone is a vast improvement over what the pharmaceutical industry has to offer, right?
That's really interesting to think about those patients who are so nauseous they can't keep food down. Of course, those are the ones that need to be eating, because when you are going through cancer treatment, you got to keep up your strength. You got to eat, and
marijuana is the only anti-nausea medication that also increases appetite. None of the other ones also stimulate appetite. So there's that. So then our most common patient problem is severe chronic pain. So when you go to your doctor gives you a medication. It may or may not work, but you can't titrate it to effect, right? But with medical marijuana, you can. If you, say, are using a vape pen or an edible, if it's not working for you, you can keep using more of it until your pain is under control, right? Mm-hmm. Because unlike narcotics, which if you take too much, you're going to die, there's no fatal dose for medical marijuana. So you have a substance that you can just keep using it until you're not suffering anymore.
I have a friend who broke a bone just in the last 2 weeks. She's in so much pain, and she's never had been in pain her life. She's never broken a bone. She's never been in a car accident. She doesn't really know pain. And so her doctor gave her a pain medicine, and it's acetaminophen and mixed with I'm going to remember it. One of those opiates. And so it says 1 or 2 every few hours, and she was really afraid. She doesn't want to get addicted. She knows a lot of people who are addicted to pain meds. So she took 1, gave her a tiny bit of relief, and of course made her constipated because it's the opiate.
Of course, and constipation can actually, for some patients, be life-threatening.
Yes.
Sometimes you need surgery to treat the constipation.
Right. I know another person.
Patients have to take enemas, and it's really a horrible problem.
Right. Exactly. And they're already in pain, and then you do something worse. So she took it, and then she figured out that if she took 2, she'd be totally have no pain, but she would also not be so numb that then she'd overexert herself and then she'd be in way more pain in a few hours. So it's like
Right.
the drugs made her really disconnected from her body, and she was very uncomfortable taking the drugs. It just made her uncomfortable in her own skin, and she just didn't like it. So, but she had to take it because she was in terrific pain. It's a really bad break that she has. And so she got her refill, and I just knew this would happen. They gave her the wrong dose. And so she sat down, she took her 2 pills because she was used to taking the 2, even though she most of the time took 1, but she's like, okay, I'm going to take the 2. She couldn't move for 8 hours. They made it 4 times too strong. Not of the acetaminophen, of the opiate. She couldn't move. She was on the couch, like I was with her, and she could not move her body. And so we got her some medicinal marijuana tincture, and she really enjoyed that. She doesn't have very good sleep, and she got really good sleep. She said that it didn't completely take away her pain, but she was, like you said, she was dosing by herself. So she just did 1 dropper full because she's very scared of being too out of control out of her own body. So she took just a little bit. She noticed it took down her pain. She was still in control of her body, could still feel, so she didn't overexert herself, but it really made it manageable. And I thought that was really cool, that that's the difference between this pharmaceutical drug, which was causing all these kind of effects, versus the, if you quote unquote overdose on medical marijuana, you just go to sleep. It's not like you're not
when you
having,
wake up, you feel great.
Yeah,
instead of, like, if you overdose on narcotics, you can go to sleep and never wake up.
Exactly. You're not, there's no dying, there's no constipation or diarrhea or or any of those negative side effects. If you take too much, you're just gonna have a nice nap.
Right. And actually, this gives people so much control over the medical conditions that you don't typically get with pharmaceuticals, right? You have control of the dosing, and it's safe. And so it's much better. And also, there was a study done recently that they followed patients who were given narcotics after surgery, and 6 months later, 6% were still using narcotics, which means they're addicted. These are people who were not using narcotics before surgery, and 6 months later, they can't get off them. So it's not the majority of patients, but when you consider the fact that there's millions of surgeries performed in the United States every year, having all these people become addicted who, never were addicted to anything, and now they can't get off narcotics, that is a serious problem. Mm-hmm. In the past 12 months, we've had over 65,000 people die from narcotic overdoses, and every year it's going up. Studies have shown that when you add medical marijuana to people who are taking narcotics for chronic pain, within a year, 44% are not taking any narcotics at all, and most of the rest of them have decreased their doses of narcotics, which is completely contrary to what happens when you're just taking narcotics. Typically, you have to take more and more and more and more and more to get the same effect for pain. And also, if you're addicted, you have to take more and more because your body gets used to it, and it's really dangerous. So we have a safe medication where there's never been any deaths, and then we have something else that last year caused 65,000 people to die. And the people in our organization, a number of them have come to work for us because they see it safer, and they've lost people that they care about to narcotic overdoses. And it's a really common problem, and it's a really horrific problem that medical marijuana can help with.
So what other problems? So you've got, pain, sleep, nausea, the anxiety, depression, and the kinds of things we sort of typically know that medical marijuana has helped. Are there any really unique things that you've seen miraculously it help?
Yes. So there's not enough medical literature to say that it definitely works against Crohn's disease, but we have had so many patients come to us and say, it changed my life. I was in so much pain, and I had so much symptoms from my Crohn's disease. I couldn't leave the house because I had to be within a few minutes of a bathroom at all times. And I started using medical marijuana. I got my life back. I have a job now. I can go out of my house. My life's back in my control. So that's another
What do you think that is? Is it because it's anti-inflammatory?
It's anti-inflammatory, and we also have cannabinoid receptors in our digestive tract. We have a lot of them, as a matter of fact. So it seems to modulate the disease and actually treat the disease. Again, the medical literature hasn't documented that, but here's another reason that we really need to have more research on this, because there's so many people that are telling us these things. We know it has to be true, but it just hasn't been documented yet in the medical literature. And since it's Schedule 1, it's incredibly difficult to do research on it. I talked to Dr. Abrams, who's an esteemed researcher at UC San Francisco, and he's published hundreds of papers. No problems ever getting any research approved. He's treated a lot of patients with HIV/AIDS, and they were telling him that it helps treat the neuropathic pain that they get. That a lot of them were having pain, and they said, look, this works. So he wanted to do a study, got turned down, couldn't figure out why. So for years, he was trying to get this study done. He was in Washington, D.C., and just serendipitously, he met the man who was head of NIDA at that time, National Institute on Drug Abuse. And they became friends, and the man said to him, Donald, your study will never be approved. And Dr. Abrams said, why? And he said, because we're the National Institute on Drug Abuse, not for drug abuse. We can't approve your study. It's in our mission statement. We're supposed to be showing the negative effects of drugs. And so your study will never be approved. So Dr. Abrams went back to the UC San Francisco, thought about it, redesigned the study. And the question that he asked in this study was, number one, does medical marijuana negatively affect the blood levels of HIV medications? And on the side, we'll just check and see if it helps these patients with their pain. So the study showed that it does not affect the blood levels of HIV medications, but it does, in a statistically significant manner, help people with their pain. So that's the type of gymnastics that academic researchers have to go through currently to get their studies approved. And it just, that's just wrong.
Wow. Well, I good on him for figuring out that he just had to say it in the negative.
Yes, but isn't that sad though that he has to do that? Shouldn't these brilliant researchers just be able to ask questions like, does this help patients with Crohn's disease? Does this help patients with PTSD? Right now, Dr. Sue Sicily is trying to get a study done on PTSD. It is very difficult because it's really difficult to get the right types of medical marijuana. There's only one place in the United States that you can get it legally from right now. That's at the University of Mississippi. And researchers have had a hard time getting the types of strains that they want to study, the levels of THC and CBD they want to study. And that's really unfortunate because you have all these suffering people. They just want to know that, does it work or not? And the answer is probably yes, but it's really hard for a lot of physicians to write recommendations until they see it in the medical literature that yes, indeed it works. Meanwhile, in Israel, the Ministry of Defense pays for soldiers with severe PTSD to get medical marijuana. They actually buy it for them. So, we know it works, but we just haven't been able to get the studies completed in our country. And again, it's really unfortunate. You have all these people who serve our country, they come back, we have something that can help them, but it's not readily available for them.
Yeah, it's frustrating how compartmentalized our system is. When science is so compartmentalized, science should be global. We should be recognizing studies from around the world and compiling them, and doing meta-analysis and accepting that. Just because it was done in another country, you get enough evidence from enough soldiers in Israel, that should be enough for us to move forward with it. If there was a pharmaceutical drug, it would have been approved by now.
Well, actually, that's really interesting, Ashley, because there is a pharmaceutical drug that hasn't been approved in this country, that has been approved in other countries. It's called Sativex, and it's proven to work against the problems of multiple sclerosis, the muscle spasms and pain. Legal in Europe, legal in Canada. The company, last I heard, had spent over $300 million trying to get it legally available in the United States, and it's still not legally available here. So, we know it works, but it's not available for patients. But we actually do have a one-to-one CBD and THC medication that our patients with multiple sclerosis can get, and it works really well. So, we are giving them the medications that they need, and it's really, when I wish you could spend a day in our dispensary, because when you hear these patients' stories and how it helps them, so we have a topical lotion. It doesn't seem like a medicine. As a doctor, the only topical lotions we ever used were like for psoriasis or rashes, but this is something that gets absorbed, and it helps people with their pain, and it doesn't make them high, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people like the euphoria. A lot of patients, they just want help with their pain. So a man came in, he purchased it, had horrible joint pain, worked beautifully, came back in, and we had just temporarily ran out. He was distraught. So we said, okay, as soon as we get it back in stock, and that's not going to happen again, we'll make certain it's always in stock. The day we had it in stock, we opened at 10 o'clock. He was there at 10:01. I mean, these medications really work. And so, it's just kind of sad right now that it's not legally available, medical marijuana, in every state. We know it works. We see it. We hear these people coming in. They're telling us this helps. And so,
can we talk a bit about like the science behind why is it that marijuana works? Why is it like there's these cannabinoid receptors? Am I even saying it right?
yes. So Dr. Meshulam, who Israel is right now is nominating for a Nobel Prize, probably should get it. He's called the father of medical marijuana. He discovered that we actually have receptors in our body. They're throughout our body. So they're in our brains, they're in our joints, they're in our heart, they're everywhere. And when we ingest medical marijuana, either through inhalation or topicals or ingestion, the active compounds of medical marijuana bind to these receptors. That's why medical marijuana has all these different amazing benefits, because we have receptors throughout our body, right? So for instance, it seems to be helpful in slowing down the progression of glioblastoma in the brain. So how could that be? So there's receptors in the brain, right? And there are studies that show that it inhibits the vascularization of tumors. It gets into your brain, so it can do that. A lot of chemo medications don't go past something called the blood-brain barrier. Marijuana does, right? So marijuana can get into your brain and have effects there. We obviously know that it can get into your brain and have effects, right? It binds with receptors in your digestive tract, so it can help with inflammatory diseases and problems like Crohn's disease, right? It's really an amazing medication, and I actually did a presentation recently where I said, this is really a medicine that has so many benefits in so many different serious diseases that we really need to embrace it and study it, and we know it works, right? We know that we have these receptors, we know it binds to these receptors, and we know it treats these conditions. So let's make it legally available for people who are suffering and whose lives are on hold in many cases because they have such serious diseases, no medication's working for them. We have something that can help them.
I have a friend who's in this industry as a healer, and he has a very interesting belief after studying all these doctors and some of them that you've quoted. He believes that when someone has a deficiency in cannabinoids, because if our body has receptors for it, like our body has receptors for insulin, right? And if we had an insulin deficiency, I mean, obviously there's a root cause, like why are we deficient in insulin? But yeah, exactly. So, and if we have a serotonin deficiency, then we're going to get depressed and lots of other things. But if there's cannabinoid receptors in our body, just like there's serotonin receptors and insulin receptors, then he believes that it's actually a deficiency in cannabinoids that causes certain types of epilepsy. And that's why when they go to take the cannabinoids, these epileptics that no other medication is working for, and especially these children. You see these videos on Facebook and YouTube, these kids having epilepsy, just horrible seizures, and then their parents give him like the CBD spray in their mouth, and their whole body relaxes. And so many parents have had to move to different states where it's legal, like uproot their whole family and move just to give their child relief. And these sprays that even like the CBDA. So when there's it, for those who don't know, when there's this is my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when it's CBDA, THCA, when there's an A behind it, that means it's the acid form. So it's not psychotropic, so you're not going to get high from it, but it will fulfill that need within the receptor. And so in your experience, do you think that some diseases are actually, or some symptoms are actually an expression of a deficiency of cannabinoids?
So that research has not been definitively done, but it definitely makes sense. And we do see a lot of people that they titrate it to their effect, and whatever medical condition they have is successfully treated with it. So when you're talking about people who have to move because marijuana isn't legal in their state, they're called cannabis immigrants because there's so many of them. There's hundreds of families in Colorado that have moved there because they have a child with epilepsy, and they're at their wits' end, right? They're losing their children. If you have a child with untreatable grand mal seizures, every time they have a seizure, they don't breathe. And so when they don't breathe, they don't get oxygen to their brain. So slowly there's cumulative brain damage, and eventually their children are lost, right? So these are desperate people, and doesn't work for all of them, but for some children, this is a miracle medication. It's the CBD form, typically not the CBDA form, but it doesn't make the children high. It just treats their epilepsy, and it can be an absolute miracle drug, and it can prevent their children from dying from a terrible disease. And isn't that a tragedy that people have to move to another state, pick up their lives, get new jobs, leave their families, their friends, just because this isn't legal in the state that they're living in?
Right. Now let's talk about the controversy. So are there any, in your experience as a doctor, negative effects of medical marijuana?
Yes. So if you don't use it properly, just like any other medication, there are potential negative effects. You can actually hallucinate if you take too much. I mean, you really have to overdo it. And one of the things that I really emphasize is educating our patients. So that should not happen, right? We teach them how to take this properly. But if you really want to overdose and really just take 100 doses, you might hallucinate. So what I would tell that person is, go to bed, go to sleep. When they wake up, they'll feel fine, and that those effects will have worn off. Also, if people really, really overdose, they can feel very anxious. They can feel paranoid. These are side effects, but it's not like the side effects of a lot of pharmaceuticals where you can have liver failure, you can have kidney failure, you can die. These are side effects where people will feel uncomfortable, but when they go to sleep, we just tell them, go to sleep. When you wake up, the effects will have worn off and you'll be back to normal. So it's really a whole different level of side effects and negativity versus a lot of pharmaceuticals. And you're only going to have those effects if you've really, really overdosed. We teach patients to not do that. We do teach patients, we tell people, don't drive and use this medicine. That's kind of controversial because there definitely are people who can drive safely with it. There is no good test to determine impairment at this time for driving. So we just tell everyone, when you medicate, don't drive. And that's a challenge for some people, right? Because people have to get to work, right? But we're pretty emphatic about that. There should be a test coming out pretty soon for impaired driving with marijuana. We know there's tests for alcohol impairment, right? And there's a lot of really smart people working on this. I anticipate that pretty soon we'll have that test. So I do tell patients, though, do not drive after you've medicated.
Well, and same for pain meds. Like, if you're on an opiate, you should not be driving.
But that's not illegal. And people are not told if you're on Valium or narcotics, don't drive. They should be told that because, again, there's not good testing for whether that's going to, whether you're endangering yourself or other people. People do it all the time. They shouldn't.
Yeah, no kidding. And just so many innocent people die in traffic accidents every day. From silly things like texting while driving or being on medications, even sleep deprivation. If you are not getting enough sleep, that can
Right.
Dull your senses and cause an accident. So we have to be on our best form. We're operating a giant machine that could kill someone, and we have to stop taking it so lightly.
Right.
Now,
we emphasize that.
Yeah, is it addictive? Can our body crave it and get addicted to it?
That's very interesting because here's what typically happens. People will have like horrible depression or horrible anxiety problems, right? And so they don't want to stop. Why? Because this treats their problems. Some people would say, well, that person's addicted because they can't stop. No, they could stop. They just don't want to stop because they don't want to be clinically depressed. They don't want to be so anxious that they can't function, right? So if you use medical marijuana and use it every day, you can have withdrawal symptoms if you just abruptly stop it. But it's like the withdrawal symptoms if you stop drinking coffee. If you withdraw abruptly from narcotics, you are going to really, really be suffering horribly. It can be like the worst flu you've ever had. So you really would want to do that under a doctor's supervision. Alcohol withdrawal, if you've been drinking consistently and you just stop, there's a 10% fatality rate from that. 10% of people who are chronically drinking will die if they don't stop drinking under medical supervision. Marijuana, you stop, you might be a little jittery, you might have a little bit of insomnia, maybe for up to a month if you've been a really, really heavy user for years, but it's like stopping drinking coffee. And everyone that I've ever talked to that wanted to stop using medical marijuana, they just stop. It's not like you need to do it under physician supervision. It's not like anything horrible is going to happen to you if you stop. If you want to stop, you can stop, and the physical symptoms are pretty minor, unlike the physical symptoms of narcotic withdrawal or the physical symptoms of alcohol withdrawal.
That's good to know. I know a few pot smokers when they are pretty chronic and when they don't get it. The worst that happens is they get really irritable and you just don't want to be around them. But
Right.
but it's not like a 10% fatality rate like alcohol, which is legal. It just boggles my mind. Cigarettes and alcohol, which are so damaging to the body, are legal. Fried food, so damaging to the body, is legal. And then you have something like a natural plant that has so many medicinal properties, and that's illegal. It's just it's silly in my mind, and we can misuse so many things out there in nature. So it's that are legal, right? We can misuse a lot of things that are legal, and so to think like, well, someone can misuse marijuana and as a hallucinogen, for example, but you can go out into the forest and probably find a mushroom to eat that's legal, that you eat enough of it would not be wouldn't be sober. Yeah.
There are mushrooms that can kill you. You can have liver failure if you eat the wrong mushroom.
Exactly. Now, speaking of liver failure, how does the body process marijuana? So someone eats an edible or they smoke it. How does the body eliminate it, break it down, and remove it? Is it through the kidneys, through the liver?
It's through the liver. And there's another thing that we'll teach patients, there's different effects when you inhale it versus when you swallow it. Because when you inhale it, it goes into your lungs and right into your bloodstream. And the initial effects, there's no change in the initial molecules that you inhale, right? But when you swallow it, the THC starts out as delta 9 THC, and then it gets absorbed into your digestive tract, and the blood flow from your digestive tract goes right through your liver. So before it gets into the rest of your body from your digestive tract, it goes through the liver. The liver changes it to 11-hydroxy THC, which has a little bit different effects. So some people might like edibles better because of the effects, because it's 11-hydroxy THC. Some patients might like the inhaled effects because it's a different cannabinoid, right? That's the predominant cannabinoid typically. So, education is power, and the more educated you are about this medication, the more effective it's going to be for you, right? You'll be able to harness its effects and use it to the way that works best for you. So I'm really excited about our ability to answer all of our patients' questions and to steer them in the right direction and to help them get the best possible effects from this incredible medication.
So we've got the vape, right, which is much healthier than smoking. So the vape pen, and then you have the edibles, and you have like a Canabalm, like something you can rub on the skin. How does the body process that? The Canabalm, like when you rub it on the skin, is it like an edible where it has to go through the digest, or is it more like a vape? Like how does it?
It's more like a vape, but there's typically you don't get the psychotropic effects. You get more binding to the cannabinoid receptors in that local area. So you're going to get like a local pain relief typically. And you don't typically get a lot of systemic effects from something that you put on topically. And for a lot of our patients, that's exactly what they want, right?
That's very cool. And have you seen this help the body repair? So I get that we're using it in a lot of these cases to mask symptoms. I know you expressed that people are sharing that their Crohn's symptoms are being relieved. But in your experience, is there anything you're actually seeing be healed, like at the root cause, at the root level of the disease or the illness?
So they're actually, when I was at these Harvard conferences, they showed there was a case study of a patient that had metastatic cancer, and the physicians that were treating this patient said, we've run out of options for you, and just you need to prepare for the end. This patient didn't accept that and went on high doses of Rick Simpson oil, and went back to their physicians about 6 months later. They were amazed that he was still alive. They did MRIs, they did studies, couldn't find any cancer anywhere. So, this is documented. This is, Western medicine, patient treated. The MRIs show cancer everywhere. Used a high dose of a cannabinoid extract, came back to the physicians. The repeat MRI showed the cancer was gone. So
I love that. That's so cool. I want you to tell us more about what Rick Simpson oil is. But before you do, I have to share that I actually have a friend who had a skin tumor, and she applied Rick Simpson oil to it and then put a Band-Aid over it and just kept doing that, and it fell off. So I don't know. That was just totally anecdotal.
I've heard those stories from patients also. So it's like a whole cannabis extract. Tastes terrible, typically. We really want everything to taste good. Some patients actually use it rectally. And
so you're like the Willy Wonka of medical marijuana.
We will study the product, look at the best ways for ingestion, and recommend that for our patients, right? So a lot of cancer patients are actually using Rick Simpson oil rectally, and it's absorbed and it's working for them. Some patients that we have will use it orally. There's no way to really that's the one substance we have that there's really no way to make that one taste great.
So does your lab make it? Your lab,
yes,
your lab makes the Rick Simpson oil, and that. I'm sorry.
We make it. We have it in our dispenser, and we are determined to keep it in stock at all times because we hear these amazing stories of how it helps people.
Tell us more stories. Share some stories.
So there are a number of patients that have come to us and said, this cured my cancer. Now, I don't have documentation from these patients that what they're telling me is true. I just know that, there's presentations at Harvard that have documented that it actually, nothing else was given to this patient that was presented at Harvard where their cancer was cured. That was it. That was the only medication they were on, because the oncologists, the cancer doctors, were saying, nothing's working. I'm sorry. And, you need to prepare for the end. So that patient went on Rick Simpson oil. Typically, you go in a gradually increasing dose of it. And for some patients, it seems to actually cure their cancer. Again, we need more research. We need to figure out how this works, how often it works. Are there different strains that work better than others?
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely, there's enough stories out there, enough people saying that this is what I used, I wasn't using anything else, and this is what happened to me. It's really hard to ignore that. And it's certainly, it's not going to cure all cancers, and I would never tell a patient, stop your chemo, use Rick Simpson oil instead. But I'd really like to know, how many people this would work on, right? And it's, when I think of what I had to go through to have my cancer cured, the double mastectomy, the 28 radiation treatments, the 4 months of chemo. If I could have just used Rick Simpson oil instead, that would have been fantastic. But we just don't know enough right now to know, does that work better?
Yeah. And you think the millions of dollars that are going, millions and millions and millions of dollars that are going into cancer research are all going into the kinds of research that are going to end up lining the pockets of the pharmaceutical companies. There isn't a lot of research, millions of dollars going into, okay, what kind of natural things can we do that aren't patentable, that's not going to profit anyone, that's totally free, that you can grow in your own backyard to cure cancer. It's all about
one of the problems, one of the reasons that there's not as much research being done as there should. You can't patent this very easily. And so, I can understand a pharmaceutical company not wanting to spend $500 million or $1 billion, which is what I've been told it costs to get something approved by the FDA, and then not have a patent on it, right? Mm-hmm. Then anyone can sell it, because now they've spent up to $1 billion, and they're not going to make profit from it in any way.
So before I get into talking, I have lots of questions for you about your products. Are there any other things that the listeners should know about, like, what it's good for? So we've covered a bunch, but are there any other kind of odd things that it's really helpful for that people should know? Because maybe a listener's listening and they don't have anxiety, depression, pain, nausea, or problems with sleep, but they might have something else. Is there anything else that you love to let people know that medical marijuana helps with?
Absolutely. We have a number of patients that have suffered from horrible migraines their whole lives. And bad migraines, unless you know someone with it or you have it yourself, it's really hard to understand how horrible it is. People who have bad migraines are vomiting. They have to be in dark rooms, sometimes for days. They're completely non-functional, and they're in agonizing pain. There's certain types of migraines that actually have a higher incidence of suicide.
I was going to say that right. You're in that amount of pain. I've had I think 3 migraines in my life. And I remember thinking to myself, I just want this to end.
Right. So imagine having that experience maybe a couple times a week. Oh. And you don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know how bad it's going to be. You don't know how long it's going to last. And that's your life. So some people just can't live with that. And there are people who've actually killed themselves because they just can't deal with that level of agony. Medical marijuana, not for all of these patients, but for a number of these patients where nothing has worked, it's a miracle drug. And, we actually have what we call the people who help our patients, patient care advocates. We actually have this woman who works for us. She came to us, and she and her husband wanted to invest in our company. And what happened was their son had cyclical vomiting syndrome. Oh. It's like a migraine of your digestive tract. And so what happens is at any time, you can just have this agonizing pain and you start vomiting. So imagine being a young man in your 20s. You're on a date. and all of a sudden, you start vomiting, and or you're at your work and you just start vomiting. It's absolutely horrifying. And he just became, he wouldn't leave the house, was stopped work, wouldn't date. And these were people who are very conservative, didn't know anything about medical marijuana, went to every physician that was an expert on this. Nothing worked. And in desperation, they started looking online. What could possibly help? There's a lot of stuff online that says that it can help with cyclical vomiting syndrome. So he became a patient, and it controlled his cyclical vomiting syndrome. He got his life back. So the mother has migraines, horrible migraines, really incapacitating migraines. She used it now for her migraines, and it works. She actually became a patient care advocate for us. Really doesn't need to work, wealthy family, but she really believes in this medication, and she wants to help other people. And it's made an absolutely dramatic effect on her life, her quality of life, her son's quality of life. And we hear these stories all the time. The people who work for our company, they're really excited to come to work and do what we do, because we really change people's lives. It's an amazing medication. And there's a retired Harvard professor that we have. He had shoulder surgery, and they accidentally cut a nerve, a major. And so he had something called neuropathic pain. It was capacitating. He could not get out of bed. His life was over. He was not functional. He had so much pain. He was afraid to move. In desperation, once again, he tried medical marijuana. He's out of bed. He's got his life back. He's testified for us when we wanted to open our dispensary. He lives in the community where we wanted to locate. And he said, here's my story. This is what happened to me. This gave me my life back. I see him in the dispensary every once in a while, and comes in, walks in, smile on his face. And it's a really gratifying thing to be doing. As a physician, I can help one person at a time. Having this company, we help hundreds of people every week.
So
there's
cool.
There's just hundreds of stories, just like what I've told you.
So what about dosing? Now imagining like someone with migraines, they don't have to take it 24/7. They don't have to keep taking it every day, or do they take it once a week, or just when they get the migraine? How does that work?
So when you have something like migraines, you want to medicate as soon as you feel the either pain coming on, or they have something called an aura, where they can see spots. There's different things that can happen to people with migraines where they know it's coming and that they're going to be experiencing one. That patient, you would tell probably to use a vape pen, and to use it as soon as they have symptoms. Our vape pens, they're like about the size of a ballpoint pen. You can carry it in your purse, you can carry it in your pocket, so you can have it with you at all times. You would titrate to effect, right? So you would use it, take an inhalation, wait 2 minutes, see if it's effective. If your symptoms come back or keep progressing, you would just keep using it until your symptoms went away. Then I would tell the patient, take an edible, just so that you have long-lasting effects, right? If the symptoms come back in 7 or 8 hours after the edibles worn off, they could again use a vape pen and then go back to the edibles. So the edibles, in the past, in other companies, there's been a real problem with dosing. They did a study on the West Coast, and I'm hoping the problem has gotten resolved there, but the labeled dose versus the actual dose in the products, it was all over the place. So to me, as a physician, that's not acceptable, right? So we do internal testing of our doses, and we also have an outside lab that we're unaffiliated with. It's another problem. Sometimes the dispensary companies will have part ownership in a laboratory.
Oh.
So you don't want that, right? You want really a complete separation between the laboratory and the company that's making these products. So we have that, and we get accurate dosing. So with edibles, what we typically tell patients is you start with a low dose. You can always add, right? But once it's in your system, you can't take it out. You just have to wait until the effects wear off if you've taken too much. So typically we'll tell patients who've never used marijuana start with 5 milligrams. Patients who use medical marijuana daily, they might need a higher dose. They might not, because edibles work differently than the inhaled form. So we'll teach patients, start with a low dose, assess its effects, and then you can add whatever you need to add to get the effect that you need, which is such an improvement over pharmaceutical medications. Again, right?
How different is this from like the wheelchair pot someone smoked in high school?
It's completely different.
Because I imagine there's some listeners going like, yeah, I smoked pot once and I couldn't move for 4 hours and I ate 5
so
bags
again,
of chips.
It's titrate effect. And so here's another thing. So some patients still want to smoke it. If we can't convince them otherwise, I have patients who'll say, this has helped me with my chronic pain or my horrible anxiety. This is how I've used it for 20 years, and I'm not changing. This is what works for me. Maybe eventually we can get them to change it. But so here's how we deal with that. The medication that the actual flower is much more potent than it was, the stuff that was imported from Mexico or grown illegally. It's really been, it's really a form that works much better, but you need a lot less, right? So we teach patients the joint that you're getting on the black market is probably different than the joint you're buying from us. Ours will be more powerful, probably work better. So take one inhalation, see if it works, wait 2 minutes. If it's not working, keep using it until you have the effect that you need. We actually have small joints that we sell because typically our patients don't need to use an entire street-sized joint. A much smaller amount will have the effect that they need.
I'm imagining these rappers. I've seen those pictures of the rappers, the music rappers. Not a gift rapper, a rapper, music guy.
Right.
And they got a joint the size of a cigar.
Size amount of our flower products. It would be probably for almost every single person. It would be way too much because it is stronger. So the only, fine, that's great. You need to use less, right? So it's actually, it's a good thing.
So vaping is far superior than smoking it because of why? I think I know, but tell us.
So there's a Dr. Tashkin at UCLA, and he said, I spent my life trying to prove the negative effects of marijuana. He's a lung specialist. And so he thought he was going to show that it causes cancer. He thought he was going to show that it causes horrible lung problems. So it was very interesting. There was a study done, and they studied people who smoke cigarettes. They studied people who don't smoke anything, and people who smoke marijuana. And it was like 1,000 people, and they followed in each group. They followed them for 10 years. So it was a really large group of people. The cigarette smokers, of course, had a statistically significant increase in lung cancer rates. The people who didn't smoke anything, 2 of them had lung cancer. The marijuana smokers, none of them had lung cancer. So Dr. Tashkin was kind of scratching his head. But when you understand that marijuana has anti-cancer properties, right, there's something called VEGF. I could get into the boring science, but it's actually been shown to have some anti-cancer effects.
You're welcome to get into the science. Not boring on this show. Please get into the science.
Okay. Well, there's a Dr. Guzman in Spain who's studied this. It appears that it causes death of cancer cells. Tumors can't survive if they can't stimulate growth of blood vessels into them, right? They need blood and oxygen just like normal tissues. But medical marijuana stunts the growth of those blood vessels growing into the tumor. So it appears to definitely have anti-cancer effects, right? So he showed that even people who smoke a lot of marijuana over a long period of time did not have an increased incidence of cancer. But when you know that it has anti-cancer properties, that really makes sense. So then he's looking at, so what does it do to the lungs? So he did show that people who are really heavy smokers all day, every day, long periods of time, they do have an increased incidence of chronic bronchitis. But he also showed that if they stopped after a month, 4 weeks after they stopped, their lung function went back to normal.
Whoa, that's totally different from smoking cigarettes. I mean,
exactly.
because
Right.
smoking cigarettes, you're not going to totally recover in 1 month.
And for a lot of patients, you never recover from smoking cigarettes because you get something called emphysema, which is permanent lung damage, and you don't heal from that. When you have that, at some point you become incapacitated because so much of your own lung tissue has been destroyed.
I watched my I watched my grandma die of that, and so I know that the lungs just fill up with fluid. They're just too damaged on a cellular level.
And that doesn't happen with medical marijuana.
Really? So why vape instead of smoke?
Because of chronic bronchitis, and because we need to study more the effects of these the products of combustion and marijuana. Why not use the safe, the product that we know is safe, the product that we know doesn't cause chronic bronchitis, the product that we know doesn't have carcinogens in it? You've got something that we know is 100% safe. So we prefer patients use that, but we also tell people the truth. And, this is the truth on this subject.
Wow, that is really, because I thought for sure smoking pot would be as damaging to the lungs as smoking cigarettes. I was sure of that. That's really
And so was Dr.
fascinating.
Tashkin. But after 30 years of studying it, he showed that it isn't.
That's really interesting. And so what about tinctures? So because we've mentioned edibles and vaping, and then the Cannabalm. I keep calling it Cannabalm, but is that, what do you guys call your lotion?
That's a good way to describe it.
Okay.
Yeah, because it is a balm, and it's a medicine, and it alleviates suffering. So tinctures are another great product. We have them. And again, we have very accurate dosing, and we teach people exactly how to use them. So tincture products, it's kind of a hybrid between an inhaled product and a swallowed product. So you put it under your tongue, a few drops of it, and depending on what you need it for, depending on the patient, depending on your tolerance, we would recommend a certain number of drops for one patient versus another.
So it absorbs sublingually?
Right. So the onset is faster than when you swallow, because when you swallow, it has to be absorbed into your digestive tract, right? And that can take 1 to 2 hours to work. The sublingual, some of it will be swallowed, right? So you have the long-lasting effects of a swallowed product, but some of it gets absorbed immediately because the tissue in your mouth absorbs products immediately into your bloodstream. So you have the combined effect of the immediate effect, because it immediately gets absorbed. Some gets immediately absorbed into your bloodstream, but some of it, you just can't help it. You're going to swallow some of it. So you also have the long-lasting effects of something that you've swallowed. So you have both benefits: immediate onset and long-lasting relief.
And is tincture the same as spray? Because I've heard people do spray or tincture.
Yeah. Well,
that's
there's all kinds of sprays. There's topical sprays that you can use on your skin. There's topical sprays that you would use under your tongue. There's a lot of different types of sprays. There's actually sexual enhancement sprays that we're developing a product for that seem to work very well.
When you say work, can you be more specific? Is this for someone who has chronic dryness in that area, or or has low libido?
Chronic dryness and actually sexual response, it's anecdotal reports, but there are some people that say that it makes them more sexually responsive, and they're more likely to have orgasms and longer orgasms.
Well, there you go. There's a whole industry right there. That is an entire section. Now, you are, and this is the question I'm sure it's been on everyone's mind, you're not in every state, are you? Like, not anyone just around the world could be your customer, or could they?
Right. Right now you have to be a Massachusetts resident to come to us. We'd like to be in other states, and we're hoping that happens. We're really proud of our products, and we're proud of how we treat our patients. We're proud of how we help our patients. We think we have fabulous products. Our patients tell us we have fabulous products. So we would like to go to other states, and we probably will.
So you can't sell to states like Colorado or Washington State where anyone who's 21 and older can just walk into a store and buy these kinds of products. You can't sell.
Currently, it's illegal to take any sort of marijuana across state lines. One of the reasons that we have a great relationship with our regulators, and it's because we follow all the rules. One of the rules is you cannot take products across state lines. So what we'd have to do is we would have to source the products within the state that we're in and sell it within that state. And that's how we would do it. Of course, following all the regulations of the state that we located.
Well, you know what? Massachusetts is a beautiful state for those who want to be, what was it called? Cannabis immigrants?
We believe we have great products, and yes, there are people that have actually moved to Massachusetts. We have a patient who was living in another state. She's in hospice care, and she knew that this would help her, and it is helping her.
Oh, wow. Now, I'm looking at your website, which is gardenremedies.org. And of course, the link to that and everything you do is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast. So listeners can go to learntruehealth.com for that. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And those links are absolutely going to be in the show notes of today's podcast. So you can connect with Garden Remedies. I'm looking at your list of products, and it's really fun to read. It's just fun to read. I'm like, that sounds interesting. You've got some like barbecue sauce, and tell me about your different, because I have I imagine that there's people out there who want to give this to their mother-in-law or their aunt, and they don't want to walk up, hand them a vape pen, hand an 80-year-old a vape pen and tell them to go to town. But if you brought over your orange marmalade, Aunt Sally might be really interested in that.
You can't give it to another.
Okay, that's right. I'm sorry.
Right, you have to be a patient yourself.
You have to be a patient yourself. Okay, so you could convince Aunt Sally to buy the orange marmalade. To become a patient. Exactly. Okay. Sorry, I'm so used to being in Washington where you can just like.
Right, exactly. We are going to have adult use legal, it is legalized, but the regulations are being promulgated now, and that will be available, but currently you have to be a medical patient. So the reason we have these products is I remember back when I had cancer. Nothing tasted good. I did not want to eat. It was a horrible time. So what did we do? We want to do everything the best that we possibly can. So we hired 2 cordon bleu trained chefs. We built out a full commercial kitchen, and we are constantly asking our patients, what would you like to see? We know you're struggling with this. What would taste good to you? What would you like to see the medical marijuana in? And then we make it, and then we give it to our patients. And so these are products that people were requesting, so we made it. And it's horrible enough if you have a serious disease. The least that you can do is, your medical marijuana products, if you're using it as an edible, you want it to be delicious, right? These people have enough suffering without having to swallow something that tastes bad. So one of our goals is we don't sell any edibles that don't taste delicious.
Yeah, the problem is if it tastes too delicious, you have to remember to dose it.
We educate our patients. This is how much you should use to start.
Yeah, I think the first question should be: are you the kind of person that you have to eat the last cookie in the bag, or can you eat one cookie a day? Because my husband's like,
you don't want to use the whole bottle of barbecue sauce. On your piece of chicken.
Well, my husband, I think, is almost accomplished that. He loves barbecue sauce, and he says don't bring cookies in the house because even gluten-free organic cookies, because if he opens the package, he has to eat the whole thing. It's just it's like that personality. You have to eat the whole pint of ice cream, right? So just don't even bring it.
Maybe that patient, we would steer them away from the barbecue sauce because it is delicious.
Very, very cool. Tell us a bit about your other products you're really proud of. So, oh wow, you got massage oil that's really neat. What are kind of the ones that are the best sellers that we should know about?
So we have something that we call taffy. Now it's not an edible, so it's a little bit confusing, but we teach our patients what it is. So some patients need a very concentrated form of marijuana. There's kind of old style stuff called shatter, butane extracted, has carcinogens. We don't sell that. So we have something that we call taffy, and the reason we call it taffy is because it's a concentrated form of marijuana that has a taffy-like consistency. You only need a pin drop of it. You heat it up and you inhale it. And so for people who need a very concentrated form of marijuana, it works beautifully. It's doesn't contain any of these byproducts that some of the other companies have in their concentrates. Again, I'm a physician, and I'm not going to let any of our products have anything in it that could possibly hurt our patients. We want the best products on the market possible. So it's an extremely highly concentrated form of THC. It's over 90% THC, which is a pretty remarkable thing to do. And it took our PhD chemist a while to figure out how to make this.
Why
But,
that? Why what would that be good for? Why would someone want that?
so some patients need a very concentrated form of medical marijuana. Say they have horrible, severe chronic pain, that would work well for them. We have patients that tell us that they're on high dose narcotics. We've even had a patient that was trying to get off heroin.
Oh wow.
So other forms of medical marijuana might not give a concentrated enough effect to help them get through the withdrawal of heroin. But this worked. I'm not saying it's going to work for everyone, but there are some people that can get off these horrible drugs that have, lethal effects. That's a person that would use a concentrate. Some people just need a very concentrated form of medical marijuana. This is it. This is what they should use. And this is the state-of-the-art formulation for that. Old style was something called shatter. We have a better product.
So is that like hash? Or when
Better
you hear someone say hash, okay. We're learning the lingo. That's really interesting to hear about someone being able to get off of heroin using this natural natural substance to help their body, get over it, because that's horrific, and that's becoming such a huge epidemic.
And a lot of people who are heroin addicts or are not addicted to other narcotics, they're treating PTSD, and it takes away their pain, it numbs them, but it also incapacitates them. And so this is something that has been proven in other countries. In Israel, they know it works for PTSD, and it actually helps treat the PTSD, helps diminish people's symptoms, and it's it's not going to kill anyone, unlike narcotics.
Right. And so you've got these different cannabinoids, like looking at your product list, it'll say it has this percentage of THC and this percentage of THCA and this percentage of CBD.
Yes.
What is when someone has, for example, post-traumatic stress and they're looking to self-medicate or like dose themselves so they can help themselves naturally, is it better to go for something that has more CBD or more THC, or how would they know?
So that's a very interesting question. So what we would tell patients typically is we would get a complete symptom list. PTSD really isn't just one problem. Some people have horrible panic attacks with PTSD. Other people, they may have more depression. Other people, a lot of people with PTSD have horrible problems with insomnia, right? So the first thing that our patient care advocates would do is tell us about your symptoms, tell us about your suffering. And then with that, then we would guide them to the product that would be most likely to help them. One of the wonderful things about medical marijuana is if you try something, say, with a high CBD and low THC, and it's not working for you, you can always try something with a high THC and a low CBD, or half and half, the cannabinoids are half THC, half CBD, and use whatever works best for you. And you can figure that out, within a few hours. You just inhale one type of cannabinoid mix. If that's not helping you with your symptoms, then you can try something else. This is a whole new paradigm for medical treatment, because typically with pharmaceuticals, you'll try something for at least a couple of weeks. Antidepressants, typically you'll use it for at least a month. A lot of typical pain medications like gabapentin, you'll increase the dosage over a month. So you may not know for a month whether the medication that's been prescribed for you is going to help you or not. But with this, you can know virtually immediately whether this is the right thing for you or not. And these are among the reasons why there's over 2 million medical marijuana patients in our country.
That seems low.
Well, I think those are all the ones that are registered. Here's the thing. There are medical marijuana patients in states where it's not legal and they're buying it illegally. They're not going to be counted in that number, right?
Sure.
There are a lot of states where if you got a doctor's recommendation, you can go to dispensaries, but there's no system to count how many patients are going, right? So in Colorado, they knew it's about 2.2% of the population. That's because you have to register with the state to become a patient to go to medical dispensaries. Most states don't have that. So it's best guess. It's probably higher than that number, even though that is an incredible number of people. But it's really hard to get the exact number, just because there are a lot of people out there who don't, they want to be anonymous. They can get fired from their job if they're using medical marijuana. They can have real legal problems. And if it's in a state where it's completely illegal, they could go to jail, right? So
amazing. Just amazing at this day and age. It's a crazy world we live in. Now, vaping, is this, you said you have the best vaping, and you really, obviously you've got this fantastic lab, and you're so thorough because you're treating this as a medication. How does it work? I know I see people vaping like tobacco, or not tobacco, but like vaping nicotine. They put liquids into or put vials into the vape pen. Are they putting the flower into their vape pen, or are they putting how does that work?
Very interesting. Good question. So you can vape flower, and we do have vape pens that we sell where you can do that. But the vape pens that I'm talking about are where we've taken the active ingredients from the medical marijuana and condensed that into an oil that you then inhale. Now there's some companies, some of the biggest, most successful companies have something called polyethylene glycol in their vape pens. And they use that to, if they don't put it in the product that they've made, you can't inhale it. It's too viscous, too thick of a liquid. So what we do is we actually add terpenes, which is one of the products that's actually in the plant, to decrease the thickness of the product, and it has active. It has medicinal benefits also. So the only thing that's in our vape pens are the extracted products from cannabis. Some of the biggest companies have this product called polyethylene glycol in their vape pens, and that's toxic to the lungs, and it can actually convert into carcinogenic ingredients.
So not all vaping is created equal, and not all vaping is healthier than what they're trying to do, the alternative, which is smoking it. So that there's actually some vaping, which is, and whether you're vaping marijuana or whether you're vaping
most
nicotine.
Tobacco products have PEG in it.
Pardon?
So
they have what?
Most vaping oils and that are tobacco products have this polyethylene glycol in it. We won't do that. We won't put that type of toxic ingredient in our products. We figured out a way to make our vape pens have the right level of thickness without adding anything extraneous or toxic.
Wonderful. And what is, I understand if it's proprietary, but what is the oil that you use to extract the medicinal properties from cannabis?
So we use the whole flower. We have a multi-step process that we use to get to our final vape pen. We use a CO2 extraction method, and then we have secondary processes that we do to create our final product. And that's a proprietary, and that,
Of
that's
course.
something that our PhD and our Masters of Science and our other gentlemen that had spent 10 years learning extractions, they've figured this out.
But it's not like you're not adding like sesame seed oil, or you're not adding an oil, a vegetable oil to this.
The only thing that's in our vape pen oil is cannabis.
Okay, got it. So it's kind of like essential oils in that.
Exactly.
Is that you're extracting the oil from the plant as well as all of the medicinal properties.
Exactly.
So it's like plant juice.
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, now I get it. Because you said your oil, I'm thinking like, what is this? Like olive oil? Like what?
No. It's an oil that's produced. That's actually the plant isn't the active ingredients. It's like an oily product. The trichomes, which are the active ingredients in the plant, if you just took all the trichomes off the plant and put it together, it's kind of an oily substance.
God, that's really, really interesting. I can see why you geek out on this.
It's fascinating.
It is.
The more science you know, the better products you can create, right? So we got PhD chemists to help us make our products, and we're very proud of what we've created. We also have something called a rosin, which is a whole plant extract, and this is kind of a tricky thing to produce because every strain is a little different in terms of how you apply pressure and temperature to get the final product. But it's another way of making a concentrated form of medical marijuana, and it also has all of the medicinal properties in it. It's a very popular product that we make. Our patients give us very positive feedback on that.
Very cool. So my understanding is that, because you really work one-on-one with each patient, help them, and you tell them, take it slow. You can dose yourself, but let's take it slow. So someone who maybe has depression or anxiety, or they have an inflammatory disease like colitis or Crohn's. Can they take this throughout the day, but they do it at such small doses that they can function? They're not just perma-stoned and still receive the medicinal benefit. So can someone have a normal conversation, go to work?
Absolutely. In fact, I'd say the vast majority of our patients medicate throughout the day, and you would never know that they're medicated because they're fully functional. It's just their abdominal pain is gone, or their nausea is gone, or their migraine's gone. The people that we see, for the most part, they've got their lives back. They're fully functional, and they don't act high. They're not high. They're just not suffering anymore.
I have a friend with endometriosis, and she was unable to function at least 12 days of the month.
It could be completely incapacitating.
Her pain was so bad that she was just unable to move for 12 days of the month, couldn't, keep a normal job. Luckily, she got a job with a friend who understood her condition.
See, what that is you have uterine tissue usually throughout your abdominal tract. So you have bleeding into the different areas of your abdominal tract or other areas wherever the endometrial tissue is. Mm-hmm. And it is horribly painful. And the worse case you have, the worse pain you have. And
what I was getting at is that she got turned on to Rick Simpson oil. And she's like one of those people that is just now a total believer, screams it from the rooftops, has to tell everyone that it works, because now she can function, and she doesn't during her cycle. Now she's just kind of like bad cramps to you and me, where for her bad cramps are like a walk in the park, and it has totally changed her life, and it's just Rick Simpson oil.
Got her life back,
mm-hmm.
Right? We hear these stories all the time. People get their life back. They're not suffering the way they used to suffer. It's really, I have heard this type of testimony so many times. It's so exciting. It's so gratifying to hear these stories.
Now, the future of MMJ, I mean, it's so up in the air. We've come such a long way, but it is really up in the air. How do you feel about the outlook? You know, I know Big Pharma's trying to, I mean, they've made some of their, and we've talked about that a little bit. They're trying to get in on this and patent some stuff, but it's missing all the constituents of the whole plant, so they're never really going to win. And then we've got these states like Washington that now you can go to like you could go to a 7-Eleven and buy alcohol. You can go to a 21 and older store and just buy this pot, but it's not the same as medicinal marijuana at all. It doesn't, it doesn't have the kind of labs you work with. It doesn't have the same quality. It's all over the map in terms of quality. And so those who are looking for an actual medicine are kind of left in the dark because of the fact that it is made legal. So we don't really have that in the state of Washington, have wonderful labs like you. So where do you see this going? Are you going to be able to expand and be in more states and be able to serve patients with this quality of product? Or
Absolutely. Everything that we do, we try to make it the absolute best we possibly can. And I couldn't live with myself if we ever lowered the quality of our products. So we will always make, our products to the absolute best quality possible. And, even if we are selling to recreational customers versus medical patients, there's no reason to lower the quality of what you're producing. Why not do this in the best possible way?
Right. And because there's the need and because it works,
Right.
there's always going to be a demand for it. So wonderful.
Absolutely.
Well,
And there'll be more and more demand as time goes on, because more and more people are learning about its benefits and how it can help them.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I guess, before we wrap it up, is there any other condition that is really exciting to use this, like autoimmune? Are you noticing that it helps? Is it antimicrobial, or does it help boost the immune function? Or should we know any other science or anything else that you really geek out about that you'd like to share with us?
It does seem to be an immune modulator, help with immune function. But again, we need to do more research to really, study that and determine exactly, does it work as an immune, stimulant? How does it work?
How can we, because there's so much more need for research, right? How can we as individuals help this cause along? Is there anything like, should we call a representative or call, some, like, what research labs, or what do we do? Do we talk to the FDA? Like, who do we tell that we really want as a population, we want the cancer dollars to start going towards this kind of research? Or who do we talk to about that?
So absolutely, talk to your state representatives, congressmen, senators. So when people contact their politicians, the way they look at it is everyone that contacts them, there's probably 20 people out there that feel the same way that didn't contact them. So it really does make a difference when you contact your elected officials. They do listen, and that really is a way to help move this forward. Also, medical marijuana should be rescheduled. Right now, it's in the same category as heroin. That's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous, and it's in a more dangerous category than cocaine. So that needs to change.
Really,
and
has anyone died? I mean, has anyone ever died from overdosing on cannabis?
Never. So it needs to change, and it was put there really for political reasons a long time ago. It needs to be a Schedule II medication at the very least, and that would make it easier for research to be done. There's a lot of really smart people that would really love to do research on this medicine. They know it's an amazing medication, but as you heard from what Dr. Abrams had to go through, it's not easy to study it, and that needs to change.
Wow. So anything we can do is, contact our representatives, and
Absolutely.
and is there any other steps that we should take to help this as a cause?
I'd say that the most important thing is to contact your elected officials. it's hard not to be cynical, but they really do listen. And the more people that contact them and say this is what they want, the more likely it is to happen. They do listen, and things are changing and they are getting better.
Wonderful. Well, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show. It's such an interesting topic. I love the work that you're doing. I love that you took this into your own hands as a cause, and that you have such high standards for quality. It really does show. And I would love that chance to just be a fly on the wall and watching and hearing all of the stories of the patients coming in and their relief and their excitement and their joy from what you're doing. I know probably
come visit us. We'd love to give you a tour. We're proud of what we've created.
Oh, well, and listeners, please, if you can go or if you're in the New England area, you're in Massachusetts, go check them out. Garden Remedies, and of course it's gardenremedies.org, and that link is going to be in the show notes. And then where are you located precisely, so our listeners who are in that area will know?
So we are in Newton, Massachusetts. We're right off the I-90. We're on Washington Street. We're just west of a big Marty's Liquors in a medical building.
Very cool. And I see there's a picture on your website of your dispensary, and it is beautiful. It looks like I don't know. It looks like a spa. It's so pretty. I can tell.
I helped design it. I wanted it to be beautiful because I want people to walk in there and know that using medical marijuana, they're not doing anything wrong. This is a good decision that they've made, and we're here to help you.
Yeah, it feels very welcoming, very warm, and I love the little gift bags in the display. I feel like I'm gonna walk out after getting a pedicure and a facial with some fancy creams.
We will make you feel better.
Wonderful. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. As
Thank
things
you so
develop,
much, Ashley. It's been a pleasure for me too.
Yeah, and as things develop, if you get more locations, or as the laws change, and excuse me, as the laws change and you're able to expand into other states, I'd love to have you back on the show so you can share your new locations and what's up. I know that you seem like you're right on the cutting edge, with all your scientists geeking out in the back room and in the lab.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, please come back on the show and share with us your progress. That would be fantastic. It has been a wonderful pleasure, and keep up the great work with what you're doing.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me to speak about this.
Absolutely. And listeners, gardenremedies.org. Even if you're not in Massachusetts, maybe share that with your friends that are in Massachusetts. It's not needed for everyone, but for those who are suffering, it's such a wonderful blessing. And so let's share with our friends, on social media and stuff. Share gardenremedies.org, and let's hopefully we'll educate some people about this and let them know that it is available as an option. And please, for anyone who has a friend who is suffering from any of the conditions we talked about today, please share this episode. Let's turn this a ripple into a tidal wave and help as many people as we can. Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ashley.
Enjoy what you heard today on your episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Did something move you, inspire you? Did you get great information that's going to change your life? Awesome. That's exactly what I'm here to do, is to help you gain your health back. Please turn around and share this. If this is something that's helped you in any way, share this with those you love. Love the Learn True Health podcast and want to support us? Awesome. You can go to takeyoursupplements.com and you could support us that way. You'll get access to amazing supplements that are just really great quality for a great price. And there'll be someone on the other end of the line to help you pick out your supplements that are right for you. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Or join our membership, learntruehealth.com/join. That's another great way to support our podcast, support our movement, and you'll be supporting yourself. Gain more information, wonderful videos, wonderful trainings, and you'll also be able to share those with those you love as well. So go to learntruehealth.com/join. Want something fun for free? Go to learntruehealth.com, and right there on the front page, you'll see where you can get our free cookbook. I spent a lot of time making it, and it was so much fun. It's really delicious, healthy recipes. And you can also get our 7-day doctor course. Right there, it's 7 days of naturopathic videos sent right to your inbox, and you can learn from top naturopaths on how to gain health naturally. So that's takeyoursupplements.com for wonderful supplements. learntruehealth.com/join to join our awesome membership, which is only open for a limited time. You can get our free healthy cookbook, and you can also get for free 7 days of wonderful naturopathic videos sent to you. Just go to learntruehealth.com and you'll see it right there on the front page. Thank you so much for being a listener, and thank you for sharing and helping others. Let's spread this information and turn this ripple into a tidal wave.